and the direction to know whether they're going towards the Black Sea or they're going towards Marmara Sea. Correct me if I'm wrong. In some other cases, we want to get an impression how seabirds use the marine area adjacent to, let's say, colonies or sites where they roost. So in that case, you want to know how many birds are how far from the coast or from your observation point, and what they're doing there. Are they feeding? Are they resting? So you see, both are coastal counts, but the types of information are different. So this data sheet that you got tries to incorporate all these different aspects, and of course it can be modified if needed for the needs of our project. But what I'm going to describe is different aspects by using this protocol. So, like I said, how coastal counts can be used for marine IBAs. First of all, coastal counts are used for collection of data in a similar way as ESAS surveys for the sea and seabird abundance. So how many birds, or what is the density, their movements, and behavior. But because there are coastal counts only in the areas which are marine areas which are close to the coast. So this way we can use coastal counts for surveys of either migration bottlenecks or bottlenecks which are associated with daily movements, which is the case of Bosporus. So during this time, the birds that you saw, they were not on migration. The yelp ones that you saw were not on migration, most probably. So they might have been associated with daily movements, foraging movements. But then, during the migration period, you see huge numbers of birds which are flying in a particular direction. So this is migration. And then you can assess how the birds use, by coastal counts, how the birds use waters adjacent to coastal sites where they congregate for some reason, either because there are colonies there or there are roosting sites there. And then finally, for shearwaters and their colonies, we can use coastal counts for counting rafts. Now, what are rafts? Shearwaters, before they go into their colonies, they form large groups which can consist of hundreds and thousands of birds, and they're waiting for the shelter of darkness to go into their colonies. So sometimes you can see in front of the colonies these large groups that are just waiting, and then at the right time they will go into the colony. So if you have a chance of going to, let's say, Yelkon colony at night and stay there, you will see that at night it's a mess. During the day you will not hear anything, but at night it's like a horror movie. There are flying, there are shadows flying all over you, all over the sky. So you can use these rafts to estimate, to at least get an impression that there is a colony somewhere around. It's not necessarily a colony on the nearest island to the raft. It could be somewhere in the area. But in general, also from what we have seen in Greece, but also from other countries, these rafts are formed in a radius of about 5 kilometers around the colonies. So, okay, and then putting all this information together, we can use them in association with other types of data, such as ESAS, to determine the important bird areas and to delineate them. So basically, what are coastal counts? They're counts from land, or maybe even from, let's say, if there is a oil rig, so you know where the oil is being pumped from a stationary point, looking at the sea by using either telescope or binoculars. In the ideal case, you can have a view of 160 degrees, but okay, depending on the morphology of the area, then you can have usually you have much smaller view angle of view, and what you can then you have different choices of how to use how to count birds. Take into consideration that we are human and we can, you know, we have energy only up to some point in concentration. So there are different options. Let's say, if I remember correctly, here in Bosporus, you were counting for how many hours? 8 hours? 4 hours, and counting birds in half-hour intervals, right? You're counting birds for half an hour. Okay, there are this many. Then in Greece, so this would be, let's say, this one. Also in Greece, in some cases we did this. In some other cases, we said, okay, we're going to count for 45 minutes if we didn't have enough people. Count for 45 minutes, and then for 15 minutes they will rest. And then again, 45 minutes and rest, 45 minutes and rest. All this was done, again, for about 4 hours up to 6 or 8 hours. And another method is, probably most of you have participated in midwinter waterfall counts, which is basically look and see method. So you go to a point, you do a scan, and you say, okay, I see these birds. And this is useful for rafts or for colonies, because there is not much point, let's say, if you want to estimate a raft, to do continuous count. Okay, now I see 1,150 birds. After 5 minutes, 1,200 birds. You can just, okay, you can sit there and wait to see how the numbers change, but in fact it's one count. It's not important how many birds, really important, how bird numbers are changing. Okay? So you don't really have to count continuously. You can observe and then put just the maximum number for a raft. So which are the types of data that we collect? Of course, species and their numbers that we see, their location at sea, or their movements, meaning the direction of their movements, and of course, in some cases, also behavior. So behavior also means, if we're counting rafts, that this is rafting behavior. If they're feeding, we can determine that they're feeding, if we can see that. So in order to somehow correlate the coastal counts with the ESAS, if you remember from our previous presentation, in ESAS you have these bands. So 0 to 50 meters, 50 to 100, 100 to 200, 200 to 300, and more than 300. Now, we have decided these bands can change, of course, but for our purposes in Greece, we have decided that the maximum range will be 2 kilometers. If needed, all this can be modified, of course, but it's just important that you have, again, some distance bands, so that you can determine, let's say, if you see, if this is your observation point, and you see a group of birds here. So using these distance bands and also the direction angles, so this direction angle describes somehow the direction towards the north, and this one the direction towards northeast. So you have birds here, we can say, okay, we have 150 yellow shearwaters at a distance, in a distance band C, which means 500 to 1,000 meters, in the direction towards the north. So you also have spatial information about where these birds are. Not only that you have 150 yellow shearwaters. And also because this area here has a surface, you can calculate, and you can calculate the surface area, and suppose this area is 2 square kilometers. If you have 150 yellow shearwaters, you divide, in order to get densities, you say, okay, I have 150 yellow shearwaters in 2 square kilometer area. So this means 75 yellow shearwaters per square kilometer. So you get densities, because densities is something that you can compare between areas. Numbers are not really representative, because they can be in a larger area or in a smaller area. Again, for the direction, you see that the codes are the same. So north is again 2, northeast is 3, the same as in ESAS. Only what different distance bands mean is different. So, what do we need? We need a telescope and binoculars. We need data sheets, compass to orient ourselves, to know in which direction we see birds or in which direction the birds are flying. GPS, primarily to determine the position of our vantage point, so of our observation point. But otherwise, once we have this location, usually you don't need a GPS. A rangefinder in the same way as we said for ESAS. Unfortunately, I don't have it here. It's a bit different because the range is not, the maximum range is not 300 meters for distance as in ESAS, but we said 2 kilometers. But it's quite easy in Excel to make this table. And of course we need patience. Yes, so the first data sheet refers to the visit itself. So we describe the date when we started doing the coastal count, when we finished the coastal count, which were the observers, because this is a visit form that we're using also for other surveys that we're using on island or at sea. We have other options here, which is census, monitoring, distant monitoring, and just observation. But we consider coastal census as distance monitoring. So we just write coastal counts, then we mark which optical means we're using, so binoculars and telescope. Now about counting method, we can write the way we're counting. Like we said, it could be continuous count, so non-stop, or it could be counting with breaks, or so we count and then we have a break and we count again, or to describe that all the numbers are referred to half an hour time periods, just to make sure that we can then, when we're doing data analysis, to do proper analysis and to see relevant information. Now, at least in Greece, because we have many islands, we have split the whole Aegean Sea into regions, which refer to major islands. And within those regions we have smaller islets, and we set the code for those islands. And on each islet there could be more than one colony, so there could be also a code for colony here. If we do not relate our observation point with a colony, we can relate it to a section of a coastline of a particular island. What we have done is we took all the coastline in Greece and we have separated, we have cut this coastline into so-called census sectors, which have a distance of from, let's say, 500 meters to 2 kilometers. So imagine now the whole coastline being cut into sections, and each section has its own unique code. So it's very easy then to determine where geographically where you are just by saying this code. So this is a sector code. I don't know how feasible and useful this could be in the Black Sea, but for us with so many islands it's extremely important. And then of course we have a particular location code for where we're doing coastline. Coastal count, and of course the longitude and latitude of the observation locations. So, to make things simpler, simply forget about those two lines, okay? Unless we do some coding of islands, regions, sections of coastline, this is irrelevant. So what is important is that you give a name to the coastal count location. I don't know, Hagia Sophia over Bosporus, and you take the coordinates, but that's it. And then, especially for Yelpons, it could be very important to write the weather conditions, because those weather conditions could affect the presence of birds and their numbers and behavior. So, we write here the codes for all this we have down here. Right, wind speed and direction, visibility, same as in ESAS, sea state, sea swell if it's raining, and also moon cycle, like what I was saying before, because moon cycle can have a large effect on the presence of shear waters. And because we're doing that over a longer period of time during a single day, there could be a change in weather conditions. So we mark the time of the change of weather and we write what has changed. So this is the visit. This is the visit form. And then we have the, okay. I already described that. So then we have the data sheet for counting birds. The first 3 lines are just a summary from the visit data sheet. So we have date, names of observers, do we use binoculars and telescope or not, the longitude and latitude of the observation locations, and here you can write any kind of notes that you consider important. And then we have, if you compare the ESAS data sheets, you will see that almost all the fields are the same. So here we write the time of our observations as time. Then group is again when you have 2 different species, let's say flying together or feeding together. You record each species into a separate line and you mark as a single group. It's group number 1 or group number 10. Because you stay for a longer time at doing coastal counts, you might have recitings. So you could see the same group of birds flying back and forth. If you can recognize that, you should mark, because this could affect, you know, your total counts. And then the rest are the same as in ESAS. So we write down the species. If relevant, we write the age. Of course, we write the number. We write the distance. So the distance in circular distance bands that we saw before. We write the direction. Here in direction, you should pay attention that we have two types of directions. In ESAS, we have direction of flight, and only that. But here, the direction also means in which direction we see birds at sea. So if you go to the here, suppose again we have birds sitting here. So the direction means that we see them towards the north. Okay? They're in this section. If we see them here, they're towards the east, so the direction is 4. If we see them here, the direction is 7. So this is a difference with ESAS. But what is the same as in ESAS is, if the birds are flying, you just mark, okay, they're flying. Where they are flying? They are flying towards number 8. So you write number 8. So they're flying west. Okay? So the direction is used in two ways to describe either in which direction they are flying or in which direction we see the birds. Is this comprehensive? Okay.
So the code will be D8 or?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I mean, D8 would be for birds here, but if they're flying, it would be F8. Yeah.
Okay, can we have a practice for this to understand the D or C in the for C? Because in the coast we can understand.
Yes. No. We'll.
You see something. A tree is nearly 1 metric something, but in the sea it's
Again,
more difficult.
unfortunately I don't have the rangefinder with me for 2 kilometers, but if you see the rangefinder for ESAS, it's in the same way. But especially if you're doing coastal counts from the same location over and over again. Let's say you can go, if you know, okay, let's do it for Bosporus, let's say. I hope the Googler works. But if you have a location.
But if we are not in the Bosporus, if we are open sea and
Yes.
we are on the boat,
Then you will have a rangefinder.
okay.
Yes. Again, in the same way with a pencil and so. Sorry, no internet. So, anyway, let's take another. Okay, suppose this is Bosporus here, and you have a your coastal count location is here. If you know that the distance to this coast is 5 kilometers, you can then estimate where the birds are. So it's very helpful if you use some kind of landmarks or marks at sea. It could be a buoy, it could be whatever. The same holds for orienting yourself. If you know that, let's say, an antenna for a mobile network is in the direction of west, then it's also very easy to determine where is south, where is north, and all that. Okay, so yes, use that as much as possible. Okay. So going back here. So we said we use directions for describing either the direction of flight, that they are flying in a particular direction, or that they are swimming at sea in a particular direction in respect to the observer, to the one who's doing coastal counts. And all the others are, as we said, same as in ESAS. Now, what about how we do it in terms of seasons, regarding different seabird species, and about regarding different questions that we want to answer. So, during breeding season, we can either do coastal counts for assessment of shearwater rafts, to assess the distribution of seabirds in the vicinity of their colonies, or to assess the daily movements, foraging movements, at particular bottlenecks. Then, during non-breeding season, you may have coastal congregations which are using adjacent waters for feeding. Again, this could be done with coastal counts. And again, there might be daily movements from where they're roosting to where they're feeding. Then, during migration period, it's primarily the bottlenecks. And during the day, like I mentioned before, for shearwaters, for rafts, it's 1 to 2 hours before the dusk, but for shags, because they're not really nocturnal birds, they're roosting at night. Okay, we have to do that at night. Sorry, during the day. But again, there could be local variations, so it's not really. There are no general guidelines when you should do coastal counts, let's say, for shag. Any questions? Okay. I think the last presentation, which refers to the shag colony, will be the most interesting, because it will have more photos and less technicalities. Okay, so these are Mediterranean shags. It's a subspecies of a European shag. That's why it's Phalacrocorax aristotelis desmaresti. And it's endemic subspecies of European shag in the Mediterranean Sea and the Black Sea. It is considered a species of of conservation concern